Sure, you were live.
Thanks. Welcome to the January 5th Planning Commission meeting. Can we have the roll call, please, Kimberly?
Mr. Klein,
Present.
Mr. Waldman,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Mr. Imes,
Present.
Ms. Rubio Dorsey,
Present.
Mr. Sale. He's here. Mr. Svakianudis. We were not expecting him, sir. We have 6 present.
Great. Thanks very much, Kimberly. Let me present the agenda. All right, so our agenda for tonight, we have a couple pieces of administrative business to take care of, and then finishing up 2 public hearings. The first order of business is new business is election of officers for the next calendar year. And so given we're according to our charter, we are to do this at the first meeting of the year. And I'm willing to serve again for another as chair for another term, another year. And Ms. Rubio Dorsey has offered to move into the vice chair position. Could I have a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion for Alex Klein to serve as chair for the 2023 year, and for Ms. Teresa Rubio Dorsey to serve as vice chair for this upcoming year.
Second.
Great. Any discussion?
Good move.
Good move. All right.
All righty. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Any
Dissent or
Does it-
abstention?
Yep. All righty. Well, thank you all, and I look forward to serving as your chair again for another year. Okay. Second order of business is and welcome Teresa as the vice chair. Look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you.
Okay, next order of business is the review of and approval of our 2022 annual report. And I want to thank Kimberly for pulling that together. And for those who don't know, it's basically a report of all of the things that we've done in the last year. And so Kimberly pulled all that together for us. And I know Diane had made a few comments that I thought were good adds. Anybody else want to offer any more comments on that?
No, I thought that they were very good edits, very good additions. And I would, with those additions, unless there's more, but with those additions, I would move to approve the annual report. It was very well done, whoever did it.
Yeah, Kimberly did. Thank you.
Oh, it's very well done.
It's very short, so it's a new format, but I guess that's what the Office of Law wants.
Well,
But
you
thank
like the
you.
old format because it's more detailed. I mean, you mentioned that in your comments.
Yeah, we could look back and find out what we actually did on some things. This is going to be, we just have to, if we really want to know what we did, we could go back to the YouTube video and see what we did. But
Well, the format, correct me if I'm wrong, but the format comes from the state, doesn't it? Or the minimum requirements?
For minimum.
yeah, but we can do whatever we want. It's our commission. We can make them extensive annual report or short version. So
Just real quick,
Short version
we're
is-
meeting the minimums by doing it in this new format, though. I
right,
believe.
exactly.
Just minimum.
Well,
right, I
second the motion.
we are sent a format
a format document
Yeah.
that we're supposed to follow to do these, that's been set up so that all the annual reports done by all the boards and commissions have consistent formatting, and and we follow that format.
I
That-
second the motion.
So
But
the,
you
the
can't
form,
help
so the
just-
format changed from the state and they sent it to us and we filled it out just the same as we would have before.
With
Gotcha.
less
We've been
detail.
encouraged to do the short format.
Yeah, so anyway, we've had a motion, a second,
Right.
and so we're having some discussion here. And I think the format is fine. It has all of the information, the summary information, and certainly will indicate if you want more, you can go back to the meeting. You can go back.
You can
to
just go back and look at the
video
minutes
or the
from a
minutes or
meeting.
whatever. Yeah.
Right, all of the information in here comes from the minutes, from the meetings. So
Yeah.
you don't even really have to go back and look at the videos. You can just, most of it you can get from the minutes.
But I think Diane's couple of suggestions for edits about having how we voted and what we approved with conditions, just a little bit more information in the summaries. Those were good.
That's fine.
Thank
We are going to double check her where she says she was at the February 3rd meeting, because the minutes from that meeting show that she was not there. So we'll look at the video and see what happened, double check that against the video.
Okay.
And then
Yeah,
we
I
may
found my
have to-
notes. Jackie, I found my notes and they're extensive notes, but what I was
Okay,
just thinking
I
about it.
understand. It's just that.
But I'm gonna
in the minutes-
I'm still gonna
Okay.
finish my sentence, whether you, so I'm gonna
Okay,
finish my
go
sentence.
ahead.
So when I found my notes, as I was just thinking about it, they're extensive notes, but what could have happened is I could have missed the meeting and then listened to the video and
Mhm.
taken those extensive notes. So that's what I'm thinking about. So anyway, I can, either one of
We
us
can
go
double
back and
check it. Kimball can double check it against the video, and then,
Right.
we can make the correction. No problem making the correction. If it turns out you were at the meeting, we can just retroactively correct the minutes, one or the
Got it.
other.
Thanks.
So no, it's no big deal.
All righty. Well, all in favor of approving the report with those couple of edits? Say aye.
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 Any not in favor or abstentions? Not hearing any. The annual report is approved with those edits. And thank you again, Kimberly. Really appreciate it. Okay, next order of business is approval of minutes from December 15th, our last meeting. I trust everybody's had an opportunity to review those. Anybody want to make a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
You
I'll-
know what, I have to double check that they have the vote on the workforce housing right for me. I'm so sorry. I looked at it as soon as it came out and I can't remember if they counted me as a no or yes. So, actually, are they handy? Let's see. Just, while you
so
guys
that-
move on, I'll read them again. So I just want to make sure that vote was correct. So I'll do that
Yeah,
and then
but
we
the
can vote at the,
workforce housing was not part of the
good. Okay,
12-15 meeting.
got
We're
it. So it was
reviewing them.
just, perfect. Okay, then.
Yeah.
Then that's fine. I will vote to approve if the motion was,
Okay, so we need it.
Yeah.
I'll second the motion to approve the 12-15 minutes. So any other discussion on this? I think they're complete and they list the exhibits that were introduced from the two public hearing, first rounds of the public hearings for 01122 and 04922. So any other comments or discussion on these?
Nope.
All right. Not hearing any. All in favor of approving the 12-15 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Any not approve or abstentions? Not hearing any. the 12:15 minutes are approved. Thanks. Okay, now on to the meat of our meeting tonight. These two public hearings were carried over from the prior meeting. So I think the way we should do this is pick up number 01122 food service standards for the purpose of modifying additional standards for food and beverage related uses in the B1 district that are subject to special exception. So for anybody that wants to get more information, see the comments that were submitted, if you go to eTrack it and under project number, put in ZTA 2022-003, you can find all that material. It's listed in the last minutes. So the public hearing is still open, and do we have anybody signed up to speak tonight?
No, there's no one here.
Okay, and to my knowledge, we did not receive any more written comments. So if we have nobody who wants to speak on this, I'm going to declare the public hearing on 01122 closed. So at this point, I think we should move into our deliberations on this. And just to refresh everybody's memory, and I'm happy to
Can you drop that?
bring up the staff report if
Yes,
anybody wants
please.
to do that. Okay. Let's see here. So basically what this was is basically to allow some of the things that are available in the B2 zone to be in the B1 zone. Let's see. Okay, here it is. Basically, these items here, essentially allowing live music, entertainment indoors, hours past midnight, rooftop dining subject to the following. And so basically makes the B1 and the B2 zones similar with respect to these particular issues. So does anybody want to start off and talk about their thoughts on this?
I'll go first. I mean, I was thinking about the fact that there was a lot of discussion about the rooftop dining standards. And I think those standards are good and important, but what wasn't included was, well, the rooftop buffer talks about a 75-foot buffer, but there are restaurants that are using parking right now instead of for parking, or will be proposed to use them for dining. And if it abuts property owners that are residential, if we could instill the same kind of buffer that we would instill for the rooftop dining, that would solve a lot of problems in at least some parts of Eastport, because there are people that abut these parking lots, which bought their houses when there was a parking lot there. So we're basically extending the restaurant out into the parking lot, which creates a lot of noise. And those people that live there, you know, they want to go to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock, and they're not going to be able to if there's a restaurant with fun stuff going on right next door. So I would entertain adding some language to allow the same rooftop buffer of 100 feet, or it might be 75, I can't really tell, to be applied for this purpose of restaurants extending into their parking lots where there's residential directly abutting the restaurant.
Diane, I want to ask you a quick question. What do you think about the fact that we're doing a lot of, when we have somebody come in and want to make something happen in a certain zone, we're just going to change the definition of that zone across all spectrum. Instead of, well, why don't you just get to apply for a zoning variance and or change the zoning of that lot and apply for it that way. And instead of, we're just changing whole code is what I'm thinking.
Well, so two things, you can't really spot zone. And so one of the things we're doing a good job at this comprehensive plan. It's really going, it's going to be fantastic. So I would almost like having the comprehensive plan happen and go in that direction rather than doing these bills one at a time like this. But no, I think the idea is you have to change the zoning. You can't spot zone restaurant by restaurant.
But they can ask for a variance, or a special exception.
Right. Go to the
And-
special exception.
And it's, I mean, I just hate to see changing an entire zone for the sake of, onesie
Couple
twosie.
restaurants.
You know what I mean? Just
But-
stick on
This is something that seems to come up a lot, that we're always changing zones just to accommodate one or two people. We tried to do that with that theater at one point that was at the corner Spa and Forest Drive, about the medical building that wanted to be a theater of some sort, but never happened. And we wanted to put a spot zoning right there. We keep doing this sort of thing instead of special exceptions, and it's dangerous because you don't know about the unintended consequences.
Yeah, doing the special exception process allows you to get a little bit more finite analysis and make
Well,
sure it's good with where it's
it-
going to go.
It just takes a little longer for them, and we keep doing these things to make things more expeditious for individual restaurants or individual companies. They like for example, the theater, they didn't want to wait 3 months. So they just said they went to the planning, changing the whole zoning, even though it never happened. They just went this route.
I actually see this as the opposite, though. I see this as this ordinance is trying to make things more consistent across all restaurants, to include the under 50 seats to be consistent with the rest of those same kind of parcels in use. So I see this as the opposite, not trying to make an exception, but to make it more consistent with the rest
Well,
of those
I
areas.
see what you're saying, but it's downtown versus Eastport, which are two very different areas. So I don't think those two should be consistent, possibly. Something to think about. Maybe they should be.
That's the problem. Yeah, I know we know that the planning and zoning hates that we have 31 different zoning districts, and there should be a move to try to consolidate and make things
Right.
more consistent, like Teresa is saying. So I think that's super important. It's what we're trying to achieve, but we can't just disregard the differences in major differences in some of the neighborhoods. And so I think that's part of the
Yeah.
problem.
I
Yeah.
view
But
it as
it-
a protective, B1 is a protective measure in between B2 and R. So it protects those neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's the genesis of the B1 is essentially to act as a buffer between the residential zones and in the B2, where you can have live entertainment and stuff like that. And I'm really sympathetic to that, especially in fairly tight places like Eastport. But I think also in West Annapolis, I know this was introduced kind of with an eye towards West Annapolis
Yes.
for having some live music. But, I mean, I think part of the issue here is live music, as it was intended maybe in West Annapolis, was like a guy with a guitar. But live music can be a guy with a guitar, and can also be a heavy metal band, and they're both live music. So
Right.
I'm still really sympathetic to keeping B1 such that it does provide a buffer. And for something like West Annapolis, if the other, the master plan that is coming out in the comprehensive plan, part of the comprehensive plan, if the other side of Annapolis Street wants to be B2, they should change the zoning for the whole side of the street to be B2. And that way you've got the street, but as the buffer, and then you've got the businesses on the other side of the street, right up next to the residence as B1 as the buffer. So in general, you know, my thought on this is that, and the other thing is I really just don't like the special exception process, because I think the criteria in the special exception are really generic and quite subjective. And, you know, what these special exceptions do is sort of give people standing to say, I don't like it. And I think that ends up being somewhat arbitrary, but so I'm just not a fan of the special exception process. So personally, I'd rather see this legislation just not go anywhere and leave the B1 as it is. That's how I look at that. Rooftop dining can that really carries, because the noise, even just clinking of glasses and talking, it's up pretty high, likely to carry over into residential neighborhoods. So I don't
even, we're still threatened. Behind me is the Annapolis Summer Garden Theater in my picture here. And we're threatened by whatever happens. So far, it hasn't been a problem yet, but we're threatened by whatever happens with the Chop Tank, because any noise over there could really seriously impact the theater across the street. And that was one of the promises made, that they would never have any amplified music. But they've got big garage doors there. You can have music inside, but what's the difference if they open the garage doors up? It's pretty much outside.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that they could get away with that could really destroy that establishment behind me. It could really destroy a neighborhood, of residences, because there are lots of ways around things. This isn't clear. This doesn't say that music shall be contained inside. It just says that it has to be inside. It doesn't say that you can't have a speaker blasting out the window or right next to the window.
Actually, it does. On item 3, it says no bar dancing or live entertainment, and no speakers or public address system shall be allowed.
Yeah, but it could be inside. Inside it could be. This is rooftop dining.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it could be right on the inside of the window and not on the outside. Chop Tank has those garage doors that open. You open those garage doors, you might as well have the music inside, but it might as well be outside. It's the same thing. It's a dangerous precedent that, there's people can get away with it.
Yeah, and when RAR opens in West Annapolis, they're going to have garage doors also.
Yeah, you open that up, and you might as well have it outside, but the music's still inside technically.
Yeah.
And the PA system is technically inside.
Yeah. Anyway, so where I'm coming down is just against recommending that this legislation pass. That's kind of where I'm.
Can I just
I am against it as well.
The original concept for the ordinance did not include the rooftop dining. I'm not sure exactly. Eric may be able to enlighten us about how that got added, but it was really primarily focused on allowing an accessory bar for restaurants in the B1 and limited live entertainment. And I will say that through the special exception process, we have limited the types of live entertainment that a restaurant can have inside, in various locations. If it was going to, have an impact on a residential area, we've put limits on the live entertainment. So I just wanted to offer up, and it does require special exception approval. But if the rooftop dining is the main point, I can't imagine any restaurant in West Annapolis or currently existing or any where they would even have rooftop dining. I mean, we don't even have any. I'm trying to
there's a lot of, there's a lot of redevelopment happening in West Annapolis.
Right, that's true, but
who knows?
Right. Yes,
So-
it could be in the future. So, but that certainly could easily be eliminated. I mean,
The rooftop dining doesn't bother
Anyway,
me.
so about the only piece of this that I think makes any sense to me is to allow a bar to operate without serving food. I think that's something that that doesn't have really any effect on,
Right.
you know, on the neighborhood. So like, I could see that being in the B1. But I think this is just so overly broad with, you know, live music, rooftop stuff, hours past
Absolutely.
midnight, you know, you know, if it just said, if this legislation were just to allow a bar without, you know, without food in the B1, I would be fine with that. But I think this is just overly broad with respect to things that neighbors are going to probably object to, which is basically the noise.
Mr. Chairman, can we look a little bit on what the staff is recommending?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the staff was recommending it as written, with, and I remember this is what Mr. Lashinsky said last time, was that they feel that the special exception process is enough to prevent, you know, to act as guardrails for something, you know, as it comes up. But again, you know, personally, I don't like the special exception process. I think they're, you know, as the Board of Appeals says, they always approve them. So,
Well, you know, but Teresa, to answer your question, I think staff would also be comfortable with a more, you know, a more restricted view, if, as long as, you know, we would support, you know, the original concept, which was a much more limited scope of what you could do in the B1 district as an additional use. This, you know, Eric may be able to explain to you how it got expanded beyond the original intent, but, you know, I think you could recommend amendments to it also. I mean, it's, you know, it's up to you, and you know what you want to do, but just offering that up.
I gotta say, I'm against amendments because nobody ever pays attention to those. But I will say,
Okay.
and they always get away with getting around amendments, but it's not something we enforce. But I'm thinking, you know, if there was just something that says the noise must be contained indoors, that would be much more restrictive for me. That I'd be more comfortable with it. But the fact that it's just indoors, that's nothing. That means nothing at all to me.
Yeah.
If I may, I just follow up what Jackie's saying. I mean, she's absolutely right in that the origins of this legislation were simply to sort of provide a more contemporary flexibility for restaurants to have the independent bar that can be kind of its own thing, and that's just the nature of for restaurants to be sustaining financially, and we did this master plan process for West Annapolis. There was desire for more restaurants, and so that's really where this came from. And I think the fact that it expanded into these other areas, I don't know how that, I think it was just trying to be simple in bringing that B1 zone up to the same standard as the other zones without really scrutinizing. That's my understanding of it, but
I think
staff would certainly support a decision to take out some of these items that are less relevant to what the community was looking for, I think. So
I think we just have to keep in mind the trends right now of all this outdoor dining and outdoor seating, and the trends for these restaurants to put in these garage doors that basically make it an indoor-outdoor area. And it doesn't seem that that's been taken into effect, the garage door issues.
No, it hasn't, David, and I would agree with you in that, but that's something I think that we need to go back and look at in terms of not just the B1, but wherever we have
Mhm.
either indoor entertainment or rooftop, doesn't matter, that we need to rethink how we approach that, because we have more and more restaurants coming in and getting the garage doors openings. It's
Yeah.
not just Chop Tank that has those, but there are
Oh,
three
yeah,
or
a lot
four
of
others.
restaurants.
So it's a really valid point, and it's something we need to look at.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
Absolutely.
I'm back to, if we could strike everything except bar, I'd be okay with this.
Could
think-
Mr. Chairman, could you go down to the legislation itself?
Sure.
Actually let's start with page 1. Let's see. In the B1 districts, the use is permitted subject to standards. And go down on page 2 now, on line 11. Recorded music shall be limited to background variety and only indoors. And then on lines 9 and 10, there's no live entertainment no bar dancing or live entertainment is permitted, except in the one district where indoor live, non-amplified acoustical musical entertainment may be permitted. And then we go to recorded music shall be limited to background variety and only indoors. So this is a standard that these new restaurants in these 2 districts, we're only talking about 3 little districts across the city, 3 little areas. So there's that. And then you go down into line 13 on page 2. In the B1 districts, rooftop dining is permitted, but it ends at 10. No bar dancing or live entertainment and no speakers or public address system shall be allowed. And then there's the 75 feet that Ms. Butler adverted to earlier. Lighting, and finally, design of the rooftop dining area shall include noise mitigation measures. Okay. Well, I hate to put, neighbors through the process of having to object, but there's a lot of control here on these situations. Now, if you agree with me that there's a lot of control and it's just not going to let things go crazy all over the, in these, if this is permitted. But David Iam's observation is really correct. And it's really important. I'm just trying to figure out how to word it.
I don't believe there's control in there at all. I think it's the fact that it has to say that noise must be contained within the inside, must be contained, which means you can't have outside music. That's all I mean. You can say as much as you want about the music needs to be indoors, but you open a garage door, it might as well be outdoors.
So music which is generated indoors
must be contained indoors. It must be contained indoors. The music must be contained indoors.
Okay.
And
Well,
it cannot, you cannot have the noise outside.
I hear you.
And how do you say that? I don't know.
Well, I think the way you said it is the simplest and most direct way. I think that you said it well. Music generated indoors must be contained indoors. Now, I mean, that may get better worded by Office of Law, but it says what I think you mean. Correct? David, are you here? David?
Sorry about that. That's what I mean. I just mean, I don't know how you would say it, that they could still open their window, but it must, remain indoors. That's what I'm trying.
No. I think you said it well.
Yeah.
So I guess my point is that you're talking about very few districts in the town. You're talking about a process that does give people really the chance to, to weigh in on these things. And if it's approved and they violate the rules of their licensing, it really gives people, and I'm sorry to have to put them through this, but it does give people a very strong ledge to stand on, to object and create a fair amount of trouble for these restaurants if they become too loud and too rambunctious. So I'm inclined to sort of support it. I'm not going to stand on philosophical dislike of special exceptions.
Yeah.
I mean, so like I think the folks in Eastport would disagree about whether noise is too much. Yeah, I think it just sets up the opportunity for conflict.
Well, I'm sure that does.
Well, and I feel like, in a lot of places where you move to a house where there's, a restaurant or something where there's live music and it's there, in law, it's called coming to the nuisance. But in a case where you moved to a street where your backyard and your bedrooms abut a parking lot, you don't anticipate there being, outdoor dining or rooftop dining, till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And it's really difficult to change your entire, it's difficult for those people when you allow that. So I would ask that at least any of the protections afforded to the rooftop dining experience, meaning that 75 buffer, also be afforded to those areas that are currently parking lots that would become essentially additional restaurant space.
So you outdoor dining, just to get
Yes.
clear here, there's a difference in the legislation in the code between rooftop dining and outdoor dining.
Right, but
Yeah.
they're very similar in so many
Yes.
ways, and in
Yes.
terms of the way, right? So I would say what's specifically spelled out with respect to the rooftop dining buffer should apply to those areas.
Let me bring your attention to line 4 on page 2. D, outdoor dining, with the exception of rooftop dining, may be permitted subject to hours of operation should be limited to 10. No speakers or public address system shall be allowed.
Well,
No bar
yeah, no,
dancing or live entertainment is permitted, except in one district. And recorded music should be limited to background variety and only indoors. I don't know why that's in the outdoor dining business. Well, no.
It's not
That's-
in the
that-
outdoor- it's
That
separate.
applies to everything.
Yeah.
But outdoor dining, it does say it's limited to 10 PM and there should be no speakers or public address system. You may want to go beyond that.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe now is the time, with a little bit of experience in outdoor dining, is what are the kinds of things that can make it a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Less conflictual with the neighbors.
But can I sort of bring us back here a little bit?
Yes.
We're really straying from what's being proposed here. What's being proposed here is not sort of a rewrite of what can happen in all the zones for outdoor dining. That's not even in question here. So I think we're starting, if we're starting to go down the road of rewriting this entire piece of legislation and not really commenting on what's been proposed here.
Well, I disagree. I don't think that we're involved in rewriting the whole thing. The other thing that, I mean.
Well,
is-
because this issue that we talked,
Excuse me,
you just talked
excuse me,
about.
Alex.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think so. I mean, we have had experience now, some experiences with these things, although nothing that specifically has been raised in testimony. It's only anecdotal that we hear. But it is an opportunity to look at these things, to make recommendations to the council to fix things as they come along. And I'm reminded from our annual report that part of our duties are to look to see how the zoning laws are operating, whether they're operating successfully or not, and to report annually to the city council. And in this is one of the ways in which we can fulfill that duty.
Okay, that's fair. But we just have to admit that acknowledge that we are, sort of going beyond what's being proposed.
Yeah, if I may, it sounds just a discussion that not only are we gravitating towards existing guardrails that are in place, but we'd like them further enhanced or further tightened rather than the opposite, which is what's been proposed. Is that a concise summary of what we're talking about here?
Yeah.
Can you repeat that? I could only hear part of that.
Sorry, that I was just saying, it sounds like in our discussion that we are supportive of the existing ordinance that separates B1 and has the limitations and would like that further refined and solidified rather than the ordinance that's been proposed, which expands and is very broad.
We needed to reflect the current trends of what's going on.
And current trends would require more guardrails, not
And the
less.
current trends.
I'm making sure I'm hearing that.
Yeah, we need to reflect the current trends with regards to outdoor dining being increased and the fact that these restaurants are putting, open windows / garage doors, like the open windows of Vita and Harvest and other places, and garage doors that they're opening to.
The blur between indoors and outdoors requires more specificity. Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be tightened.
So if
So I
I
think-
can restate what you said, Teresa, and I like the way you phrased that, that we're supportive of the existing B1 zoning, but we would like to have like to see other enhancements dealing with outdoor dining noise controls. Is that fair?
In all
Basically,
districts.
In all
Yeah,
districts that,
In all districts, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, we're supportive of changing the districts to reflect that, but what's been proposed is more of a broadening of scope that further blurs the lines rather than the containment that we're all looking for. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Reflecting the current trends.
so you could address both of those issues as something that, that new legislation
use
or
an amendment.
amendments be made to expand the outdoor dining restriction, the standards for outdoor dining to include the same standards as rooftop dining, and also to address the issue of the windows.
Well, we're not
Um,
giving amendments as we're just giving our recommendations,
Yeah,
And I'm
recommending that all be looked at.
but I wouldn't. put it in
Citywide.
as- But I wouldn't recommend it as an amendment. I think amendments are ridiculous
No,
because
right,
they're
right.
always ignored.
Because this legislation actually only deals with the B1.
Mhm.
But we have actually internally thought about how, the outdoor dining stuff really does need to be beefed up. That's really old language, whereas the rooftop dining section was actually adopted when Blackwall Hitch came in and they wanted to have rooftop dining. And that's when we developed these standards for rooftop dining, including the 75 feet and then, the lighting restriction that it's all below all below a railing level. And this was all in response to,
The one
and
restaurant.
it was all in response to community input on all of those issues. You can't have like a service bar even in a rooftop dining area. You're supposed to be, it's alcohol, served with food and no music. It's essentially no music. So that was all put in place with that. And I think Blackwall Hitch has they're the only place until we got Chop Tank and Chop Tank is in a different section of the code, and they have different standards in that maritime zone than for rooftop dining than we have for the zones that are in this legislation. If you scroll down in the code, you can see that when the maritime zones were adopted, that they were given more flexibility in that legislation as to hours and everything. And that was done, as I understand it, because they were downtown and they were just given more flexibility. We were not really involved in writing that legislation for the new maritime zones in the way that we were with for the food service component. So,
So if I can,
Yeah.
restate again, trying to get to something relatively concise, is that by saying we're supportive of the existing B1 zoning, that to me says we're not recommending not recommending this legislation as is. Rather, we would suggest that the city council look at amending the outdoor dining standards as we discussed prior. Is that, everybody agree that's where we are?
Yeah,
Well,
I think that summarizes it.
No,
we recommend approval with the following caveat or special condition, which is that the outdoor dining standards be updated, and specifically that quote, music generated indoors must be contained indoors, end quote, be added to the outdoor dining standards.
I don't think I'm hearing a recommendation for approval, though. I think most of us, and maybe we should just take a quick, summary, but I don't think we're going to be leaning towards a recommendation of approval with conditions or exceptions or amendments. I think we're recommending not pursuing or not supporting as is. I mean, or even at all. I think we want the opposite.
yes.
To me, it seems like it makes sense. And it's consistent with the way they've been doing business in the other, all over the rest of the town. It's just adding these 2-3 tiny little, areas. Just, if you look at the map, it only adds, one street in West Annapolis, and it adds 1 block in Bay Ridge out towards where it meets up with, and it looks to me like around Davis's Pub is the only third place.
5 areas, but you're right. 2 of them could be.
But I
considered.
guess I just fundamentally disagree that I don't think rooftop dining should be allowed in those B1 in the B1 that's right next to residences. So
75 feet. You think that's enough, Alex? My front lawn is 75 feet wide. That's up a page.
yeah, it's
I think
D4.
I think for me where I struggle is obviously I'm supportive of any consistency to make it, as consistent as possible across the areas. However, I like the guardrails of B1 being separate right now. I like that it's specific and it calls it out and it keeps it consolidated. I'm also supportive of further restricting the way that we talk through. So I'm not sure if that's a recommendation for approval with changes, or if that's a non-support of the ordinance at all.
Yeah, I think we're sort of split on this, is what it sounds like.
Is there a way to send it back with our, to planning zoning to kind of rewrite with our suggestions rather than just send it forward, hoping that
What,
City
do we have to
council.
give, a yay or nay if we just give them, or can we just give them our suggestions?
Well, so the original concept was just to allow the more than 50 seats and an accessory bar. That was what was originally contemplated.
Yeah, I understand that. But that's not what we're
So,
looking.
so perhaps that there could be some consideration just given to that.
Now you
I
got
mean, you could just
75
allow
seats,
those 2
midnight.
things.
I'm sorry, 75 feet. You got midnight. You got a lot of other things in there.
Right, but you could not recommend in favor of the rooftop dining or the hours after midnight or dancing or live entertainment. You could just recommend in.
And Jackie, and it says in the beginning of the document that all of these aren't just plainly allowed. They're only allowed after you ask for a special exception.
Oh, yes, it's all through special exception. So but you could say that
All
in
of
the
it's-
B1 district,
Right.
through special
Hold on.
exception. Yeah,
I want to be quick with it. Sorry, Jackie. But it's all
okay.
got to go through a special exception process anyway. But even if we didn't do this, couldn't you as a developer ask for a special exception, if this wasn't done?
No,
Can you make something up and say, I want a special exception because I want to put a Christmas tree that's 50 foot high in my restaurant?
no. You
Exactly.
can only do what the standards allow you. And currently, in the B1 district, the only thing you can't have all of these things through special exception. You can only have you can't have these things. You can currently, I believe, I have to pull up the current code.
Right.
You can have the
This
more
is all
than
about
50
us giving,
seats.
this is all about us giving permission for these things.
Right.
Right now, they don't have permission.
And
Right,
they-
and
and
nobody-
permission to ask for a special exception
Yes,
Yes,
and to go through that
Yeah.
whole rigmarole,
yes.
And that, and
which
and
goes to the Board of Appeals.
as
right?
we discussed, that having go through special exceptions, that doesn't really give you adequate guardrails because they approve everything for special
right.
exceptions.
But if you look at line 12 on page 2, right above where the 2 is crossed out, right now in the B1 district, the only thing that you can have is through special exception is more than 50 seats. You can do
Right.
that right now in the B1. So this legislation
If you get a
eliminates
special exception
yeah.
approved, but special
through
exceptions. are
special
almost-
exception. So really, you could recommend 1 or 2 of these things, like the bar, you could recommend live entertainment indoors, but I don't know that we need that. I mean, the new RAR place is not in the B1 zone. They're in PM, which has different standards, and they can already do limited
True.
live indoor entertainment in that district.
What about, does anybody have problems with the open till midnight?
I do.
I
For
do.
for stuff next to residences,
Yeah.
definitely.
I do. Yeah, I know some people, right, that actually work in a hospital and get up super early. They would be subject to this area that is currently a parking lot. It could then be an extended, an extension of the restaurant. And
But the rooftop
there's
dining is
ways-
limited to 10 in this legislation here.
But you can currently have outdoor dining, and you can currently have indoor dining till midnight in all the commercial districts. If you go up to the section above the C, where a use is permitted subject to standards, hours of operation to midnight are a permitted use in
I
all
thought
the
it said in
zoning
the special
districts.
exception, in the special exception category up there.
To go beyond midnight, it's a special exception.
Can we go there?
Um,
Can we look at that? Page 1, I believe.
If you
I thought it
go
was
up to
10 p.m.
look at line 43 on page 1. So in all of these districts where the use is permitted subject to standards, no more than 50 seats are permitted, alcohol is permitted with the service of food, and hours of operation are limited to midnight 7 days a week. So
It's 10.
all of those commercial districts can currently stay open till midnight inside right
Okay,
now.
Ted.
It says 10 p.m. Am I reading that wrong?
That's for the outdoor dining.
Right.
Got
Hours of operation are limited to 10 p.m. for the outdoor dining. That's a subset of outdoor dining, the 10 p.m. But inside, you can stay open until midnight.
The outdoor
special
dining ends at
exception.
10 as it is. You can already do special exception to get outdoor dining till 10. Actually,
It's
no,
a permitted
that's the
use subject
standard.
to
I'm sorry,
standard.
permitted.
It's, you can have
Permitted.
outdoor dining. If you have a
Permitted.
50-seat or less restaurant and you serve alcohol with food, you can have
Mm.
hours of operation till midnight, 7 days a week inside, and you can have outdoor dining with the exception of rooftop dining with, you have to serve with those
Till
3
10.
limitations.
Till 10, correct.
Right.
Till
and that's-
10 p.m., yes, you can have all of those things right without
that's a-
going through
That's a
special
ton of
exception.
ability. Why the hell do we need to expand it even more is my question. Jeez.
Yeah, about the only
Yeah.
thing,
That's
You know?
that's West Annapolis right there. That's,
Yeah,
that's
about the only thing that I would see here is, if instead of striking line 12 in the B1 district, more than 50 seats may be permitted by special exception. I could see adding in the B1 district, more than 50 seats or a bar may be permitted by special exception.
Right.
But expanding B1 to be all of the things shown below, I just think it's inappropriate for B1.
Well, that was what Alex just said was the original
Right.
concept that we discussed about modifying the B1 zone, was just adding that you could have an accessory bar.
Yes, and I would be fine with that.
Well, wait a minute, accessory bar outside?
No. No, you're even if you have an accessory bar, you can say you are still limited to what it says about outdoor dining. There are no circumstances under which, through special exception, you can have a bar outside. You just can't. And anybody who sets up a bar outside is in violation of the code.
well, that stinks because I sure would love one after a Navy football game in West Annapolis. That'd be kind of cool. Be honest
An
with you.
outside bar? Okay, well,
Yeah.
you write your own legislation then.
Let's be honest, there would be, playing devil's
Well,
advocate, both sides.
It just becomes problematic.
So why would we say that B1 restaurants in B1 can have an accessory bar. Why would we say that?
Well, that would be, cannot currently have you can't have a bar in your restaurant in the B1 district now,
You cannot have a bar in your restaurant?
No.
right? In the
Oh,
B1
so you're
district. as-
talking, let me just make sure. When you say accessory bar, it's indoors, it's not outdoors.
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly what I
Okay,
mean. You
thank
cannot
you.
have a bar. And
Okay,
if you
so now
if you're going to a restaurant right now where you're sitting at something and you're just drinking and it's in the B1 district, they are in violation of the code.
Now I
Or
see
you
the
have to bring in
genesis
your
for
own.
this
Okay,
legislation.
I got you.
So,
Well, that's interesting.
It is, Bob. I mean, because that's kind of boring, isn't it?
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think, so, you know, I think what we're generally reacting to is many of the things in the B2 that essentially produce noise, rooftop dining, etc., live music, that kind of stuff. That I think we agree that that's not appropriate in the B1, but what happens inside, you know, walking into a place inside in just sitting at a bar and having a beer,
That should be allowed.
who cares if that's next to a
Yeah.
resident? It's not that particular activity is not something that's going to affect what happens next door. So I'm very much in line with what the original intent of this was. I think it's in the effort to standardize things has just taken it way too far. That's all.
They got too expansive.
Yeah, and so, you know, I would be willing to say if you just allow a bar in the B1 along with 50 seats by special exception, that's
Well, the
fine.
50
But
seats
don't-
is already allowed.
I know,
The more than
but-
50 seats.
yes, I know, but
Oh, okay.
but you know, if we said just allow a bar in line 2, in
Right.
line 12 on page 2, and not the stuff on line 13 and all that stuff in B1, I would be happy with that. But making all that stuff that's available in B2 by special exception into B1, I just don't think it's appropriate.
Well, okay, are we ready for a vote?
Well, we have to
We haven't
decide what
made
we're
a
going to
motion
vote on.
first.
Well, I'll make a motion and you can do what you want.
Okay.
I will move to approve. that we recommend approval, provided that the following language be added to C1F. Currently says recorded music should be limited to background variety only indoors. I would that the following be added to C1F. Music generated indoors must be contained indoors. Or noise generated indoors. How's that better? Noise generated indoors must be contained indoors. So I recommend approval with that addition.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it for discussion.
Well, I think we've sort of discussed that,
I know,
but
but I'm just saying, I want to see what people thought about that.
well, I think that's my opinion is that's a worthy suggestion, but I'm just adamantly against approving all of those things that are allowed in the B2 on line 13 and below in B1. So I can't support that. I support adding that phrase, but not to the approval of everything else.
Okay,
It's hard to tell what you're adding here because it's not capitalized like you would normally see.
Well, no, I'm doing it on the fly.
Well, I'm just talking about when the legislation goes to city council, any additions are in capitals, all caps, right?
Yes.
Is that the standard in this document as well right now?
Yeah, they
Mhm.
haven't added anything.
Right, I don't see it. It's not as easy.
They-
to do that.
they've changed the way they format legislation. The new person who does legislation has some whole new system. And it's not the same as it used to be with the caps and everything. And
It's
I'm not
actually-
exactly sure what it is
It's
now.
underlined. So
Right.
in line 13, you see three, the number 3 is struck and replaced with a 2 that's underlined. And then B1 is underlined, so that's an addition. That's all this legislation does. It
Right.
Well, thank you
basically-
for letting me know that. I appreciate it.
It basically adds everything from line 13 to line 34 into the B1 zone, and I just fundamentally disagree with that.
When did we start that new format?
That was instituted by the new legislative analyst in the Office of Law. And I think that went into effect several months ago.
Yeah, that's 6 months ago, I think,
Mhm.
at least.
Well, I will speak up in favor of my motion. I finally got a second. Once again, I think that it's not affecting the citywide. Actually, citywide is already affected. And we already have these kinds of things. What's before us is available citywide. We're only talking about these 3 little areas. And I think that there are sufficient guardrails, as you say, sufficient opportunity for people to speak up, sufficient opportunity even before then for the planning department to weigh in on people's applications and tell them before they even get to the Board of Appeals what they recommend and not. And so I think that we're not changing the world. We're only changing a few very small sections. And I think that nobody's brought before us, whole orchestra of complaints, for existing businesses that are doing outdoor dining as we speak. So
Well,
I
I think-
don't think that it's going to have a deleterious effect. And I think that David Eam's suggested language is absolutely perfect. So
Well,
I think that it should go forward and we should be loosening things up rather than continuing to leave them as they are.
see, I don't think we should be loosening things up at all. I think that, things have changed, and I think we need to recognize that things have changed. And this doesn't, and I think it doesn't go far enough that we want them to look at the whole city, basically, and say, things have changed. Trends have changed. What our lifestyles have changed. Everything's changed now. And, we're not really spelling that out at all to them. We need to let them.
What is it that you would like to communicate to them?
I would say that, we need to let them know that, that we feel that they need to be more restrictive with regards to noise generated indoors to reflect current trends and lifestyle changes. And in that regard, we would recommend that further restrictions be placed, that music generated indoors.
Noise
Noise
generated indoors.
generated indoors remains indoors.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
I think that's what.
You can do the findings.
Well, I think that's what Bob had suggested, but I think at this point, we should vote on Bob's motion
Okay.
and go from there.
Call for a vote.
So all in favor of Bob's motion, which is to add that language just to line 11, but recommend approval. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
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 Any abstentions? So I think we have a 5-1 nay, so that takes that motion off the table. So now we're back to starting again.
I can make a motion. I apologize for the background noise. But I
Okay.
can make a motion to not approve the recommendations from staff on approving this ordinance, and not only not approve, but add caveats that our recommendation would be to expand item 2 for B1 to include bars, as well as add language that further restricts item 4, C4, which would contain music indoors. So those two recommendations with a non-approval of the ordinance as it's written.
I don't know if they're gonna want a non-approval with recommendations. That's novel.
Well,
But
we
you're
could
not
always
addressing
say,
rooftop dining, which is an issue as well, right?
maybe we'll take a vote and meet somewhere in the middle.
Right.
So,
And a
so,
75-foot buffer, right?
so just let me restate that. Basically, to not recommend
Non-support.
as writ, not recommend this legislation as written, but to offer that instead of what's written, that bars be added to line 12, and the language about keeping noise generated inside to line 11. Is that your motion, Teresa?
Correct.
I will second that. And
Well,
so,
I like that motion. Oh, sorry, we're not
yeah,
in
so
discussion
what
yet.
now we can discuss it. So Diane, you have comment?
Yeah, no, I think that is a good motion. I would just harken back to the fact that we have to say for those areas where we're not talking about expanding the outdoor dining to the front of the restaurant, which, you know, may face the street. Those instances where you're allowing parking that's in the back of a restaurant directly abutting residences, there has to be some kind of buffer. And I would say 75 feet is probably not adequate, but I think it's better than not having a buffer.
Then you just
So
say
we're saying we're not
adequate.
only, so are we saying we're not only not in support, we were advocating for further restrictions?
Alex, if you're gonna add that language to line 11 of that David suggested, you also need to add it to line 16, because under 11 just deals with background music. And under 16, where somebody comes in and they get approval for something other than background music, you know, to like actually have like live entertainment, you would want to add it there also, that you can, it's also contained indoors.
Right.
Very good,
So
Jack.
it's
Very
so it's
good.
not just music, it's all noise. We want
It's
the noise to
noise,
be contained.
not just
Well,
Exactly.
then maybe you just want to make it, well, I think, you know, we already have a noise ordinance. I think that you really need to, I think what Dave was originally suggested is probably good.
What did he originally suggest?
David, who proffered that amendment?
I didn't, I just
Noise-
said,
Wait a minute,
Teresa
Jackie,
did.
I need to be clear.
I said music generated indoors is what I said, but
And I suggest changing it to noise.
And I agree with
Noise
that.
generated indoors must be contained indoors? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying, Jackie? You're saying you're
Yes.
approving?
Well,
that?
all I'm saying is that, you know, I think different, okay, so what, okay. So
Did you
if
approve
you
that
have,
language
if you
or
have
not?
those doors open and you have people inside and it's not music, but they're just in there talking and everything. And then on the outside, you have people sitting and they're talking, differentiating between where the noise is coming from, whether that's the indoors or outdoors, becomes an impossible task. So I really think it's the music that's the problem. That's just my opinion, having worked with all these restaurants, that,
I
you know,
agree with you.
it's unenforceable to just say noise,
Okay,
because no one will be able to figure out. They'll all say, well, that's just people talking.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
okay.
Okay.
And I agree with Bob, because you have 20 people sitting at a table in an open air parking lot, which is now converted into an extension of the restaurant. If it's right behind 5 houses, it's going to really interrupt those people trying to sleep, even if it is 10 o'clock.
Well, then that would need to be added to the outdoor dining section also, because the section that you're talking about amending on line 11 has nothing to do with outdoor dining. The standards for outdoor dining are under D. They're Roman numeral I, and 2 and 3. Those are the 3 standards currently for outdoor dining. So if you want to add an additional standard about noise related to outdoor dining, it would have to be a new 4 under that. I understand that the food service stuff is really complicated.
All right, so, but back to Teresa's motion that's on the table. here,
Right.
Of basically just to allow bars and I guess there's this question of what to do with any language on line 11 about staying indoors. That seems to be problematic.
And removing the rooftop dining, are we gonna do that?
Yeah, but Teresa's motion does not include rooftop dining in B1. That all it does is say you can, along with 50 seats, you can have a bar by special exception in line 12.
And the
That's
bar would
motion
be
that's on the table.
inside.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. That's the motion on the table.
And I can
Right,
second
because
that.
rooftop is already excluded on item D.
Yes, yes. So if because this issue of noise inside is a whole nother can of worms, I don't know, can we take that out of your motion, or do we need to vote this down and have another motion?
The motion's to vote it down with recommendations to change it, right?
Well,
Well,
just-
I'm dealing with this specific motion that's on the floor, and so trying not to get too far off the track. It's specific motion that's on the floor is to change line 12 to allow a bar by special exception, and then some language in line 11 about noise, but I don't know that we have a good idea of how to do that. So do you want to withdraw your motion, Teresa, and just make it again?
I can withdraw, and I
with
think I'll
line
withdraw
12?
with the line 12. I think I'll withdraw. I think the motion that I'm putting forth is that we're not recommending support of this motion with the exception, we're not recommending the ordinance with the changes to include B1 into the expanded zones. However, we would recommend that bars be included in line 12, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, that's the motion on the floor. So I second that.
But that doesn't make sense to me though, because you're recommending to shut down this piece of legislation, but then add to something you're shutting down. I would say you'd have to do what you're wanting to do. I would think you'd have to recommend approval and then make all the edits to be adding the bar and allowing a thing and then getting rid of the changes.
In all due respect, that was Bob's motion to recommend approval and add exceptions.
No, but he didn't correct everything we wanted.
Well, I think this is to recommend non-approval, to not recommend approval and just start again by allowing bars by special exception in B1.
Right. I don't think you have to do line numbers, Alex. I think you all could just say that you're recommending approval only of the amendment to allow a bar through special exception in the B1 district. That's the only thing you're supporting. And I think that, that it will be abundantly clear then that they'll have to make changes to the formatting to accomplish that.
So can we neither recommend or not recommend and only say the only part of this we recommend is to allow bars in B1 by special exception
Yes.
Inside,
You can just say
inside.
that.
inside?
Right.
So to
Okay.
summarize the motion then is that we don't recommend the ordinance as written. We only recommend the changes to include bars in line 12.
Through special exception in the B1
Through
district.
special
Yes.
exception, yes.
And I think that will do it. I don't think you have to get more detailed about line numbers and everything on that. And I think if you still want to make recommendations for other things that are not really part of this legislation, which is changes to the current standards for outdoor dining and for the, noise, music not being heard outside, you could do a second recommendation where you say, we are also recommending that the council make amendments to the standards for restaurants to include the following, something along those lines. And then that would, if you all decide you support those also.
Okay, so let's vote on this first recommendation is what Teresa
Okay.
said, that
Uh,
to
and I
not
will say
recommend.
50 seats, they might want to have more than 50 seats, y'all.
They
They-
can
they
already
can.
have
They
that.
can do that. That's already there.
Okay.
Has this been seconded?
Okay.
Well, you
all-
maybe, no, wait a second, because they're yeah, you should put that in there, that you're only supporting the more than 50 seats and a bar in the B1 district, just so they don't, because of the way she's written this, where she struck out that one line. I think that Ben is correct about that.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so all in favor of only recommending bars in B1 inside and more than 50 seats by special exception. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Aye.
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 Any nays?
I'm an
Bob,
aye.
you still there?
Yeah, I'm an aye.
You're an aye. Okay.
I mean,
Any abstentions? Okay, so we're unanimous on that one.
Did Dave say aye? I didn't hear.
I did.
You did, aye, I did.
I-
Hooray for Teresa Rubio Dorsey.
Yeah.
Hooray,
All righty.
hooray, hooray.
So do we want to entertain a motion about a second recommendation for modifying the standards, the noise standards for outdoor dining? Do we want to go there?
I think absolutely. And I can do it on my part, that we further recommend that the council consider current trends regarding outdoor dining, and recommend that restrictions be placed, the restrictions be put in place to ensure that music generated indoors is contained indoors. Did that make sense?
I think you should be specific when you talk about trends and so forth. I think you should.
Yeah,
be
that
specific.
Well,
doesn't mean
okay,
anything to
trends
me.
with
Given
trends.
the trend towards open windows and basically al fresco dining.
Yeah, trends, okay, and trends, and we can put in parentheses, large openings such as garage doors and increased outdoor dining. Those are two trends.
Right. Because, technically, once they open all those windows, I mean, it's really like the whole restaurant is an outdoor dining area.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, if you think about the way, like over at in West Annapolis with Slamont, where he built that gazebo thing. I mean, that's all outdoor dining there. They've just got a roof over it.
For the
So
winter, yeah, they've got the plastic up.
yeah, they do have permits and to fix all of that, but that hasn't moved forward. But so I mean, I think there's a lot of validity to this recent trend to have all of these big windows on restaurants.
Well, and you see a lot of these windows just even on Main Street, like with Vita and
Right.
some others, where they just open up the whole front of the thing that can reopen.
But
You
you
know,
would
David,
not just want them to make these changes in, the districts that are referenced in section
No.
C, but if you scroll through the restaurant standards, you're gonna see that there are standards for BC and BR, and there are standards for MX, and it really needs to apply to restaurant. If your intent is that it apply to
No,
restaurants, no matter where they are, it would have to be, integrated into several different places in the code.
Yeah, then we could just say that all restaurants that
Mhm.
consider the the existing trends, consider the current trends with regards to outdoor dining, with regards to, open walls, garage doors, and increased outdoor dining, and establish restrictions to ensure that music generated indoors is contained indoors.
So this is really a general recommendation,
Yeah,
not
for all
specific, yeah,
restaurants.
for all zones, general recommendation for all zones that
Mhm.
music generated indoors be confined indoors.
Yeah.
Based on, these trends of having sort of open air.
Yeah,
But I would like to add that a lot of the standards that are mentioned with respect to rooftop dining should also be included. So for instance, lighting directed away from adjoining properties. If you're going to expand your restaurant into a parking lot, which is adjacent to property owners, residential property owners, you want to make sure the lighting is not going to be shining right in their bedroom windows. All those standards seem to apply to me, or several of them seem to apply for those restaurants that have, I want to call, side or backyard parking areas. Because the examples David gave about those restaurants on Main Street, it's fine to have all that outdoor dining in front because they face other commercial properties.
exactly.
And it's just fine. Even Blackwall Hitch, their rooftop dining is not really facing, across the street is Mercedes and a church that's now, vacant and probably become a parking lot. So it's not really annoying the neighbors. I'm just saying all those, or several of the standards that apply to rooftop dining should also apply to outdoor dining in the code. So add those to the standards.
Or that can be another recommendation.
It would simplify the code.
Mm-hmm. And then through the special exception process, it would be much easier because they'll have the guardrails built in. It'll say what
Well,
you
I
can do.
mean, one of the things, the way we possibly could recommend that is that there is legislation coming about outdoor dining in general, and
Mhm.
and that we can suggest that, in that legislation, they address it in the same way that it is, for example, with the same set of standards that's used for rooftop dining.
I think that makes sense.
So that's a third recommendation.
And any
And do-
legislation on outdoor dining that was drafted would be coming back to you all for review. So if it was not quite comprehensive enough for you, or you felt like it needed tweaking, you would have another opportunity to do that.
Right, but giving the Office of Law or Planning and Zoning the heads up that we are looking for this type of,
Oh, yeah, I
These
agree
kind of
with you. I'm
standards.
just saying that it doesn't have
Yep.
to be perfect.
okay.
Okay, so let me sum up these second two recommendations. Maybe we can vote on those as a package here. So the first one is a general recommendation that deals with keeping music generated indoors indoors.
To reflect current trends.
Yeah, based on current trends. And then the second one, that any legislation on outdoor dining have standards similar to what's in the rooftop dining standards.
Great.
Okay, so those two. So I'll make the motion that we add those two recommendations. Do I get a second on that?
Second.
And any further discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor of those second two recommendations, say aye.
I
Aye.
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 Any nays or abstentions? All right. So I would ask Teresa, would you do put you on the spot to do the findings,
Most definitely.
the
I'll do it.
recommendation? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All righty. Well, thank you. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of discussing 01122. All right, so the second one that we have to deal with tonight is 04922, and that is, let me, just so I say it correctly here. Oh, 4922, parking fee for the purpose of authorizing a parking fee in lieu for certain businesses required to provide parking spaces and generally relating to off-street parking requirements. And the product number, you need to track it on that if you want, anybody wants to go look at comments, is ZTA 2022-006. So let me also bring up that staff report. So we have at the moment we have this public hearing still open, and so I assume as in the other hearing, nobody else has signed up to speak on that, and we have not received any additional comments.
That is correct.
Okay, in light of those two facts, I will declare the public hearing on 04922 closed. And so now we can move into our deliberations on that. So just again, to remind everybody, as we did on the prior one, that the ordinance establishes a fee recommended by planning staff in their evaluation of 0922, which basically, it instead of eliminating, so this is sort of a kind of a competing proposal to 0922, which essentially just eliminates minimum parking requirements for restaurants. And instead, 04922 proposes retaining the existing parking requirements, but allowing people to pay a fee to waive those requirements. That's essentially what this is. So does anybody want to start us off on thoughts about this? You know, we had, yeah, anybody want to start off? Well, if nobody else wants to, I'm happy to start. The thing that I really came to, you know, based on what we heard in the public hearing last meeting, is this is really more about outdoor dining. This is really an ordinance about outdoor dining and not parking requirements. It's just, you know, it essentially tries to put those two together. So it's more about, I think, bringing parity to what happens in other places like downtown, where you know, if a restaurant wants to use public parking spaces out in front of their restaurant for outdoor dining, they have to pay a fee to use those spots. And this brings sort of parity to that. And you know, to me, this is those are very different things, because one is a case where somebody's essentially buying some public space to use as a restaurant versus using space they already own that's part of their own property, say their private parking lot, and using that space. And so I think those two things are fundamentally different things. But you know, I think it's really conflating outdoor dining and parking, which I think is a mess. You know, I think that outdoor dining certainly is something that needs to be wrestled with, and all the rules around that, as we just talked about. But that should be handled as outdoor dining and not, you know, outdoor dining as a subject in and of itself, and not having to do with minimum parking requirements. I think those things, you know, legislate minimum parking requirements or don't legislate them. and come up with standards for outdoor dining, but don't mix the two. It's, I just think it's this idea is just making things really complicated. So in general, I'm not in favor of this at all. And, also with respect to the fee, I think that Alderman Schandelmeyer put this correctly, is that the fee is paid by the wrong entity. It's being paid by the restaurant that essentially is going to, subsidize that across all their patrons. And with respect to parking, generally the people who use that parking should pay for it or not pay for it, and not sort of subsidize it across all the patrons. So I just think that it's I understand what they were trying to do here, but I just think it's misapplied.
Alex, so
Yep.
could I just add that we discussed that issue in the staff report and had recommended eliminating those references to restaurants because Alderman Tierney did not intend it to be restricted to just using it for outdoor dining. And she doesn't know how that got into the first reader of the legislation. And she has introduced an amendment now that would take all of that language. If you scroll down, I will tell you what.
Okay, so, well, let me
I just
modify
want
my,
you to know that she's rectified that issue because she never intended it to be just about outdoor dining and parking.
right, so I think, what the staff report recommends is that it not be restricted to that outdoor
Mhm.
dining use, but to other uses too. And I think, again, conflating the use of that space with minimum parking requirements is just it's just too complicated. It's conflating two things that are not related and munging them all together.
Right.
Either get rid of minimum parking requirements or don't get rid of minimum parking requirements. But don't mush these two things together. I don't care if it's for outdoor dining or to put, tacky art. I don't really care. That doesn't really matter.
Right.
I just think, buying those spaces out to do something else with them is just conflating two things that aren't related, really. So I'm just in general not supportive of this at all. I think they should, let minimum parking requirements should be about minimum parking requirements, and all of the reasons that one may or may not want to eliminate that minimum requirement should stand on its own and not get all wrapped up in this other uses. So that's where I am on this.
I have a quick question. Is there anything in this language that delineates between new construction or existing, or does it matter? Does it not matter?
Does it what?
So what?
Is there a delineation between new construction versus existing parking, or is this strictly just for new development?
No, anybody could apply. Anyone could come in and apply. You could have an existing restaurant that has providing parking and they could come in and apply for a parking waiver. And then they could utilize that space that was freed up if they were a single use site. If it was a multi-use site, and somebody applied for a parking waiver, whoever owns the property could repurpose those parking spaces. They could repurpose them to be used to meet the parking requirement of another use or do whatever they wanted with them. It's not, anybody can apply for a parking waiver, existing or new.
I think the
Well,
answer
and
to
the
your
reason-
question, Teresa, is it applies to both. new
And the
Yeah.
reason I'm asking is to Alex's point, right? If it's new construction and it's going to incentivize or revitalize some sort of construction to allow for more density and so on, some of the reasons we talked about in other discussions, to eliminate parking, to allow for that further development versus the repurposing of existing open space that would then be shared, the burden of cost would be shared by the patrons of those establishments.
Yeah, I think in the case of new construction, that's an example of basically an owner spreading the cost of buying out of those parking requirements onto all of the people that are going to participate in the use of that land. And that's counterproductive, I think. Anybody else want to
But
weigh
in
in?
that circumstances, you're placing the parking pressure on the residents, right?
You beat me to it, Bob. That was a concern we brought up before real quickly, but we just wanted to get through the briefing. And that's the worry. The pressure gets put around the corner, around the street on the backside, that's not limited yet. And then we have to go and make limitations for who can park there
Well, again, that deals with minimum parking requirements, and that's a
Yep.
discussion that we should have on minimum parking requirements, not on buying out of them for other uses. See what I mean? It just I understand
get
what
you, I
they
get
tried
you.
here, but they've just made it really complicated because everybody's who's gonna listen to this discussion is gonna think it's about outdoor dining,
Well, you're right.
and it's
Sure.
not. Keep the
But-
discussion
but-
about minimum parking requirements and have legislation on that.
Alex,
Which
I
is
get
what
you.
0922 does. And
But to play devil's advocate here, we did discover over the last 2 years that it's a hell of a lot nicer to be outside in downtown, whereas a lot of the outside that we can be in, it's outside on the pavement, which is mostly parking areas. And there's a part of me that says, I would like to see during the spring months and those nice months of the summer where we can use those parking lots and go out there and as an experiment, give permits to these restaurants. So, again, continue and let's go for it and keep doing it, which they kind of already do. And I believe they might still have some permits going through that time frame of the spring. But at the same token, we don't want to end up losing all of our parking, and then the businesses are hurting for people to go down there because a lot of Americans are lazy and they don't live where we live close in Annapolis. They may be in Arnold or Crownsville, want to come to Annapolis, and they don't feel like parking at the stadium and taking a bus. And the parking garage is not going to be the savior of all when it's done. So it's a big problem, man. I like to be outside and I like to use those parking spaces that we've learned over the last 2 years. Makes it nice. But how do we do that by separating and doing that without doing something like this? That's a tough one, but right now it's a no-go.
so you're really you're really talking about we're talking about minimum parking requirements. We're not talking about the way this legislation is currently written. Those are great discussions to have about minimum parking requirements, and my feeling is let the businesses decide with the space that they have how they want to use that. And
Just to
don't make
remind
them
you all that
parking.
you all made recommendations on all of those issues back in June when you did your findings on 09,
Right.
where you had four suggestions with that legislation.
Right, those are summarized right here on the page that Alex has up, right?
Right. So this just really deals with adding a fee in addition, that if you're going to be allowed to apply for this, there has to be a fee associated with it that you're paying. And I think that part of that has to do with the fact that to have outdoor dining downtown in the park lets people pay fees. And, that there was thought given to the fact that it was more consistent to require a fee with this if we're requiring a fee with the other.
I think it's apples. I think it's
Original
completely
thought
apples and oranges.
Well, I'm just
Oh.
telling you what their thought process was,
I know. And I don't
as I
agree with
understood it.
Yeah, I don't agree with it.
So if we shoot this down, what happens? What's it going to look like in the future for us?
You mean you recommend denial of it?
Correct.
Well, this goes back to the council, and 09, which is the companion no parking legislation, has been kind of held over until 049 comes back. And then I believe that they will both be moved forward in sort of a simultaneous somewhat fashion. I don't think either piece of legislation has at this point been to the Rules Committee. they both still have to go to rules and city government. And there was also a study that was mandated in conjunction with all of this, which was, and I don't know what the status of that is. They've been, so it would all be looked at as a package, though, as I understand it. Eric, are you still with us?
I am. Yeah, sorry, I had to get off.
Wouldn't you, is that your understanding also, that 049 and 09 would sort of be looked at in kind of a, joint fashion?
They should be. I can't really predict how
Okay,
council
we
is.
can't predict anything that happens
but
once.
It would
goes
make
up.
sense to reconcile
Right.
them. I mean, that would
Yes.
be ideal, I think.
But that's our general understanding, that is the intent on the part of probably some of the people on the council.
In that little area right by the market downtown, so no fees are being paid for those parking spots that have been eaten up, right?
You mean the Market House outdoor dining?
No, they
Yes.
are leasing that.
Yeah,
That's a major lease of that space. It's different.
They
than
have a
the-
lease for that, and they do
So why
pay
would
a
those
fee for all of
fees-
that.
But what we're talking about here is for property a business already owns, that they're
Right.
just paying a fee for their own property they already own, which
Yeah.
is a parking space.
Not to
basically
provide
paying
the
for it.
parking, is it, but with the provision that the money would go into a fund, into the city transportation fund, because I think with the idea being that eventually, the money would be used to improve intercity transportation systems, such as the shuttles, and so that there would be less pressure theoretically on, there would be more ways that people could park at the garages and gets to restaurants citywide, because we would have more public transportation. Eric, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think that's the intent of the sponsor. Absolutely. It's
Can I
So
ask
when I
some
want to go out
questions
to
about
dinner with
that?
my wife, I don't want to ride a public bus.
Well, we ride the shuttle buses back and forth from Park Place to downtown, and I think it's great. I mean, I really like it. I really
Well,
like parking at Park Place. I'll just
I would
tell you
also,
that.
I would just reiterate something I think I said at the last meeting, which is, I know it's maybe a leap of faith, but the public transit system we have today is not going to be the same one we have in the future.
Eric, I can't hear you.
It may be it's something I said the last meeting, that it may be a leap of faith, but the public transit system we have today is not going to be the one of tomorrow. If we want it to be successful and want it to be self-sustaining, or, and maybe not self-sustaining, but something that increases ridership, it's certainly not going to be the diesel buses of today are not going to be the core vehicle of tomorrow, in my opinion. So that's something to keep in mind. I think it is hard to imagine shifting the mode share of, who takes the bus, who doesn't, with our current system.
But would you not say that the response to, ridership from people who can't, when Hillman closed, the ridership, the number of people we've had coming downtown who've parking at Park Place and other garages and then shuttling down, has really been impressive?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that the rebranding and operational change of the downtown circulator shuttle has been kind of a good case study in what's possible. If you take a existing service that for a lot of people was kind of not visible and not understood, and it has been extremely successful in sort of driving increased ridership. So
Yeah.
I would add I've been taking Annapolis Go, and that's an incredible service. I'd love to see the numbers on that.
that's another good point. I mean, that's kind of the on-demand transit of the future too. So
I think people aren't aware of that one, and it is really great as well, Diane. I think I've talked to the downtown businesses, and because of all the parking issues and everything else, and all the construction downtown, everybody's business is down. I've talked to one retailer; it's 45% down. My friend is 10% down. Another friend is 5% down. So it's been crazy because everybody's doing construction and not really working with each other. You go downtown, it looks like you're in a war zone because the state's doing stuff, the city's doing
Right.
stuff. Everybody's afraid to go downtown right now. So it's kind of a mess. So hopefully once that's all resolved,
There isn't a
and
lot of parking down there right now. There's almost none.
well, especially like my friend has people up on Maryland Avenue, they took away all the retail parking for the most part all around on the streets because they all got pushed, it all got pushed to resident only when they did the Market House area. So it's really affected a lot.
Have you ever gotten held up on Main Street while somebody's waiting in the middle of the street to do takeaway for Joss or somebody like that, a delivery driver, and they just won't move? It's wonderful.
And the parking fees have gone up tremendously. I saw a $500 ticket on one car the other day, a $300 one.
Hey, all right.
A regular parking ticket's $50 now.
I don't mean to take our eyes off
Yeah, I'm sorry.
the main issue that Alex brought up, which is that minimum parking requirements and requiring a fee for, or doing away with minimum parking requirements, and then on the other hand, requiring a fee for parking that you don't use or you repurpose. But I want to shift it, just ask a specific question. What comes out of the transportation fund? I mean, is Annapolis Go coming out of the transportation fund? Will any golf cart shuttles, will they come out of the transportation fund? Does the circulator come out of that fund? Or all of those come out of that fund?
No,
No.
that's all being paid for by the AMRP.
That's right. That's correct.
The only thing that comes out of the transportation fund is our bus system.
Well, then, when Eric says, keep in mind that the future transportation will not be the bus system, why should we be putting money into the transportation fund, which funds only the bus system?
Well, you could recommend that the transportation fund be expanded to include other things.
I mean, I can tell you that our transportation department is working hard to transition the bus fleet to electric vehicles that will likely be smaller, more nimble. I mean, that's a challenging transition to make because it requires a whole transition of infrastructure and staffing and expertise. But I mean, that's kind of the future. So the transportation fund in the future will be paying for different types of buses and different types of services. I'm fairly confident to say, but
Right. Okay. Okay. But I think just to return us to the main topic, Alex outlined it, and it is that there's a real contradiction between, on the one hand, doing away with minimum parking requirements, which we recommended in June, and on the other hand, putting a tax or a fee on private property owners who want to repurpose their parking. I mean, the two are incompatible, totally. Am I right or am I wrong?
That's how I see it.
Right.
We could kind of punt on this one in that, I don't know, unless we feel capable of making the big policy decision, but we could punt on this one by simply saying, by pointing that out, that there's there's a total contradiction. You can't have both and, on the same plate. And the council needs to choose one or the other.
Yeah, I think we should just not recommend it and not recommend it and suggest that the council deals with minimum parking requirements.
Well, I think
Minimum
that,
parking
I think
requirements.
we ought to go a little further and by pointing out what some of the problems with a fee system, which is how do you set it and how do you collect it, and what flows downhill, who's actually going to be paying it. And yet it also could be used to alleviate parking problems around.
Because
It
what if
could
you
be
wanted to
used
have your parking spot in the winter, but not in the summer, because you don't want to be outside in the winter. You don't
Well,
want to pay for it in the winter.
Right, and that, right, I mean, the business owner should be able to decide what they want, you know, if there weren't any minimum parking requirements, they couldn't, you know, make it some other use during the summer and allow parking during the winter when they think they need that space for people to come visit their place. And then not even restaurants, but any business. I
okay.
just fundamentally think they should be able to make that decision themselves and not have to, you know, kiss the city's ring and pay a fee
Right, and the
on
reason.
property they already are taxed on.
The
You
reason
know
why
what I
we
mean?
have the off-street parking requirements is to relieve neighborhood pressure and pressure on other businesses that maybe aren't restaurants and bars around there. You know,
Well, is there anybody who wishes to speak in favor of this piece of legislation?
No,
I just want to say, not to be contrarian, but I do like the idea of figuring out ways to fund our transportation system to fit our needs better. And in a way, when we create a demand for smaller vehicles to get in and out of, you know, downtown and not our big box buses, you know, it'll happen faster. Instead of
well,
trying to have a fleet that's up and running and everyone's happy with before we start eliminating parking, maybe creating the less, you know, parking situation, decreasing the parking will really spur creating the transportation system we need.
so I'll assert we're already doing that by basically in the way we've outsourced things to AMRP, they're doing exactly what
Mhm.
what Donald Shoup says in his book. They're basically taking the revenue from the
Right.
parking and they're returning it back to
Now, the book
creating
says,
something else. So they're basically using it to pay for the garage.
but so
so-
you have, Alex, I hate to, this one is pretty clear to me, though. The Shoup book specifically says, and I even have it outlined someplace, that you make sure that the revenue from, you know, the off-street parking situation or, you know, paying for parking goes to the neighborhoods that are impacted. And we're saying
Right.
something different than what he espouses in his book, which is it goes, you know, he says it goes to the neighborhoods that are impacted. We're doing something different. We're putting the money into a transportation fund. And all I'm saying is, even though it's different than what he recommends, directly different, it may have some benefit by spurring the kind of transportation that's more nimble and what we need for getting to our
But
downtown
the
restaurants.
issue is who's paying? In the way this is proposed, you're basically just taxing the businesses to pay that. In the case of like off-street parking, it's the people who use that service, the people who park are paying that, essentially paying that fee. In this case, you're pushing that fee onto the business.
I agree. It shouldn't be pushed onto the businesses. I do agree with that.
Right.
Well, but
So
that goes on
again,
to
it's
the
all
customers.
about the,
But that gets passed on to the customers.
yeah, exactly. And that's,
Well, and the customers are the people
So the
some of
person-
whom
essentially
drive
the-
and some of whom walk.
right. And they all have to pay for something they may or may not be using.
Well, we often pay for something we may or may not be using. I mean, that's what a system of universal taxation is.
And when you allow a restaurant to have additional seating in where their parking was, they are generating significantly additional revenue, you know, also. I mean, I think if you're looking at it from a financial aspect of the business. If you
But
look
maybe
at,
they want to, maybe they want to use it to store toilet paper. I don't know. I mean,
Well,
again,
you're right, I'm just
again,
saying.
you're bringing outdoor dining in other uses into this discussion about minimum parking requirements. And this is fundamentally, we don't want to keep doing that.
Yeah, but
I don't think.
that's what it's about.
Yeah,
Well,
But
okay, I'll
Alex,
make a
if
motion.
someone eliminates their parking, whether it's a single user or a multi-user, they're gonna put something else there. They're gonna either add another building or they're gonna add another use. They're gonna repurpose it. They are not just going to leave that as empty space.
I get it,
So,
but you don't know what that use is. And
no, I agree with you on
So-
that.
anyway, I just think the way this is written is just not really, it's philosophically not correct.
I could make a motion that we recommend disapproval of this legislation. And
Why?
in our minutes about it, we can just talk about everything we've talked about. This is the why.
Well, we can say that it conflates the parking issue with outdoor dining, which
Exactly.
we don't agree with.
Well,
Right.
the other, but there've been a number of other points though, which is that, you know, you allow businesses to, as Jackie says, to take up space, to do whatever they're going to do. And it puts pressure on public street
Right.
parking on the surrounding neighborhood and the
That's
residents.
right. And we're not recommending.
If
they
there were
raise-
funds raised but in the course of this fee program, they could be used to, I don't know, do permit parking or do whatever, you know, whatever however it might benefit the surrounding neighborhoods. So I think if you're going to recommend disapproval, I think you got to really say why. And you
That's
got to
right.
point out what some of the possible pros of a fee system might be.
That's
So
right.
I mean, if you're gonna do this right, you gotta say why we think that it's not good. And not just because it conflates the one or philosophically you disagree with it. You need, look at the consequences.
All of the stuff we've talked about, we're going.
Yes, so maybe Ben, maybe you ought to write the findings.
I can.
Oh, okay.
All right, so we have a motion to not recommend this legislation with a discussion of why. Is that fair?
Second.
I second.
Our recommendation is to not approve the
Yes,
legislation.
yes.
Right.
Yes.
Is not recommend.
We
approval.
make recommendations whether they should or should not approve the legislation
Right.
and why.
Yes. Very good.
I move that we recommend they do not approve this legislation, and we have multiple reasons why, which will include from our minutes and our discussion. And then hack those minutes at our next meeting, and actually
the
before.
findings. In the finding, we should, it's
Findings.
findings as we,
Correct.
in our recommendation, as we transmit that to the council, it should be stated, simply and clearly.
Right.
And
Yeah, so Ben, if you want to take a stab at that, we can iterate it amongst
All right,
ourselves
We'll
offline.
take a hack, and I will be reviewing the discussion via YouTube to get them all down in there, make sure we get them.
all
Okay,
right,
so we have that
all-
motion on the table. And any further discussion?
I'll second.
I think we've got multiple seconds on that
Oh,
already,
okay.
but so
Sorry.
any further discussion on that?
No, I thought that was a useful discussion though, and I liked everyone's ideas and thoughts.
Okay,
Right.
all in favor?
I-
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Okay, we're 6 ayes.
We don't rubber stamp around here.
Yeah,
We just have one day of net. Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, they could take it and approve it all they want. We're just a
Yes.
recommending authority.
Yes, they can do what they want.
They
So
can approve
Alex,
it and-
you all
Alrighty.
need to decide whether or not you want to have another meeting in January to adopt findings on January 19th. Or we have nothing to schedule for hearing on January 19th at this point in time.
oh, really?
We do potentially have a project to schedule for February, whatever it is, 1st or 2nd. I think it's February 2nd. Do you want to cancel the January 19th meeting, or do you?
Oh,
want to-
let's keep our January 19th meeting on, and
Just do the findings.
we can go over
No.
the findings.
So do
and
we
we
have a
There's
quorum for
more than
that?
findings. There's always stuff to do.
Yeah, if
Comp
something else
plan,
comes
you
up,
name it.
Well,
Yeah,
you would
that way
have,
we-
if there's something else you all want, you're gonna have to tell us what it is.
Well, I think we should, if we do it, we should say right now, we're going to limit it to 9 PM. We're done.
And I make a motion that we go to happy hour.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, we're
Board.
never gonna get
I
into
mean, it
that.
won't be happy hour. It'll be drinks after our meeting, just to start off the new year right.
We
a
will put
B1
out an
district.
agenda that you're doing
Amen.
findings on January
Yes.
19th, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and we have a quorum, I take it.
Only if part 2 happens.
Okay, and then in February, we have one project that I believe is going to be scheduled.
And that's going to be on
Tentatively.
Groundhog's Day, and that better not be a repeating Groundhog's Day, because I don't want to have meetings the rest of my life.
What?
2
Have it
meetings
on
a month
Groundhog's
is a precedent we don't really love, is what we're getting at.
No, I'm just saying, we're having it on Groundhog's Day. I don't want it to be like the
Mhm.
movie and have a meeting every day the rest of my life.
Oh, okay, well, we'll try not to schedule a meeting every day for the rest of your life, David.
what is the project we're going to be looking at on February 2nd?
161 West Street, which is the vacant lot adjacent to Lemongrass. That seems to be finally almost to a point. They've just submitted their revisions. Some very minor revisions, and Kevin is actually doing that project. So I talked to him about it today, and he's pretty sure he can have it, it'll be ready for February, but
That's
for
a mess.
February 2nd.
Okay,
That's the only thing at this point in time we have that's ready to schedule. The Willows can still not be scheduled because they still, it still does not have APF for police. And as we understand it, they're working on legislation to amend the APF standards to change the police requirements. So that, in that legislation, then would have to go through the legislative review process. And that's all we know about that at this point in time. In
Right.
case anybody asks you about the Willows.
okay. Okay,
Okay, so we'll meet on the 19th to discuss findings, and we'll have it on the calendar. If something else comes over the transom.
What about comp plan status and what's
So
up?
are you all going to draft and circulate
was-
those findings?
Yes, we
Yeah.
will iterate that offline.
Okay.
So we'll
And
have,
I was just thinking that it might be a good thing for me to share with you where we are with the comp plan.
yeah, I think that's great.
Okay.
And Eric,
So
I
do
have
you
another
want us
question.
to- You
Oh,
want us to
sorry.
put that on the agenda for, because I'm gonna do
Definitely
the
should.
agenda tomorrow.
What's the
Yeah.
date again?
30 minutes.
You'd have to look at a calendar.
Hey, Eric, you know how when we
Yeah.
did the Maritime Task Force last, or the year before last now, there were a lot of items that we set up as conditions. And one of them was that we would be getting a report from planning and zoning on the things that we set up in terms of the Maritime Task Force. And we didn't get it in 2022. So we just want to make sure those things are in place, like the
Yeah.
fund to. Mhm.
Well, actually, Steve Rice, our economic development manager, it's something he's taking on, and he did send the letters out to all of the property owners in early December. So I think the report is coming. I mean, he's basically going to be compiling. The report is essentially stating how much maritime and how much non-maritime use is there today in 2022. That's the main thing. I'm trying to think.
Well,
there's
wasn't
few-
there a fund that we were setting up so that we would
yeah.
have training for the, maritime
Yeah.
industry and all that?
Yeah, he can speak to that. I mean, I don't think there's been any input to that yet, but I think there's one potential for that at the Annapolis City Marina, but I don't think it's been sort of consummated yet. But
Okay,
yeah.
and there were like 2 other objectives I had written down that I ran into her recently and she was like, wow, we owe you some stuff. And I'm like, yeah. Well, so
So,
well-
yeah. So Eric, did he give you, has Steve given you a time for when he thinks the report's going to be done?
No, I don't know that, but I will check with him. I'll find
That's
out.
probably not going to make it to an agenda this month.
No, probably not. I'm thinking.
I'm just
probably-
bringing it up
So-
as a reminder, since it was
Yeah.
part of our approval process. It was this explicit
Yeah.
condition that we would get the report and start it, in 2022,
Okay.
which of course we've already missed. So Just a reminder.
Yeah,
So you're gonna touch base with him about that, Eric?
I will, yeah.
Okay. Sounds, and about the fund, when that's gonna be established, because that would require legislation, wouldn't it?
Well, we did establish the fee was established.
Uh-huh.
That did, that was adopted by council.
It was
but-
just a matter of figuring out what the fee was gonna be. Is that correct?
Um,
Well, we can talk about it another time. I
Yeah,
guess you guys
yeah, we-
can
We'll
figure
get
that
an
out. but-
update on all of that. We can ask Steve to give us an update on all of those things and,
Maybe
Yeah.
Eileen, because she's still working on part of it perhaps, but I don't know.
Okay.
And I
so
just want to
for-
confirm that just before we go, John just confirmed that for the February meeting last year, I was actually in the BVI's. I did not attend. I took copious notes after I listened to the meeting when I got home.
okay,
So
well,
you can-
thank you for clarifying that, Diane.
Sure.
You know, because we based
Yep.
the charts off of the minutes and
Yep.
our Kim doesn't make any mistakes in the minutes.
Nice. I got two quick
All right.
items.
Motion to adjourn?
Well, I got
Motion
two
to
quick-
adjourn.
So wait a minute, so where we are on the agenda, so we finished our public hearings, and so we have now, the next to last item is unfinished business, so which we've been discussing, so Ben, if you have something quick you
Well,
want.
miscellany, the
Yeah.
two miscellany items, and there may be no conversation, but the signage from restaurants on Main Street downtown over the holidays, getting in the way of foot traffic and really hampering the way going through the tables that are out on the sidewalks. So our sidewalks have kind of been lost. And also going down West Street, and when you approach Westgate Circle at the west end, coming from Parole, going on West Street, approach Westgate Circle, and the conglomeration of signs that keep getting put up by the city. First, you had the app sign, the big wooden app sign, then you got another one and a third one. It just keeps growing. And I hate to see our beautiful Westgate Circle start to look like just a big signpost when it's almost like, do we really need those signs? Is that really helping, or is that temporary? And when are they going to go? Does anybody know how long those are going to be?
I doubt if they're going at any point once they've gone up.
It's the Park Mobile app and the other downtown's
Yeah.
open. It's like, yeah, we know downtown's open. We don't need a big, 10-foot by 8-foot sign to tell us downtown is open. Everybody knows,
I think that's all temporary stuff based on Hillman, and I think when Hillman is done, that should go away, I would imagine.
It just seems for this generation, we don't need those signs, we're smarter than that to know downtown is open and the Park Mobile app, and we can get that from the city. And
Eric, are you aware of whether all those signs are temporary or not?
They're definitely temporary. Can you still hear me? I had to.
yes, we can.
What about, and I don't know what happened on Main Street over Christmas. Is it still like that? Or is most of that stuff just disappeared because Christmas is over?
Well, I mean, I've seen it before Christmas even. It's just like, come in and get escargot, and the sign's sitting in the middle of the sidewalk, like really
Right.
close. It's like, come on, man,
Periodically, somebody
And-
goes out and tells all the businesses that they have to put their portable signboards up against their buildings, and
They're not, they're in the middle of the sidewalk, and it's every
Right.
damn weekend. It's,
I'll ask Lisa Minker.
I mean, it's okay in some respects, but I mean, it's
Well,
really,
Not when
they're
there's- not when
supposed to
there's
be up
nothing
against
else.
the buildings. It's a
It's getting
really
out of
hard
control.
thing to police, because they just pick them up and move them. But we can ask Lisa Minker, who's our zoning enforcement person, if she can just do a stroll around and remind business owners that they're supposed to put them up against their buildings.
at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, it'd be helpful. All
Okay.
right, those are the
Right.
two items that I had.
Okay,
And
happy
So-
to do.
Finished business.
Anybody else have any cluttered
Miscellany.
comments?
I think we're at the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment.
I'll repeat my motion.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Nice.
Aye.
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 All right,
Aye.
thank you all.